"Get your filthy hands off my keys," Ethan Caldwell said, his voice cutting through the grand foyer with the sharp certainty of a man who had never expected anyone to question him. Every conversation inside the mansion stopped at once. The marble floors reflected the warm glow of a crystal chandelier, but the air suddenly felt colder than the winter morning outside. Housekeepers stood frozen beside polished silver trays. The groundskeeper lowered his eyes. Even the old grandfather clock near the curved staircase seemed louder as its steady ticking echoed across the silent room. Maya Brooks stood near the front entrance, wearing the same neatly pressed black housekeeping uniform she had worn every weekday for the last 4 years. A ring of brass keys rested quietly in her hand. She had been locking the wine cellar after finishing the monthly inventory, just as she always did. Her posture remained calm, her shoulders relaxed, but the dozens of eyes fixed on her carried the weight of judgment before she had spoken a single word. Ethan strode toward her in a tailored navy suit that probably cost more than most families earned in a month. At 46, he had built one of America's fastest-growing real estate empires, and success had convinced him that confidence and authority were the same thing. His expensive Italian shoes clicked against the polished marble with measured precision until he stopped only a few feet away from Maya. "You're done here," he said without hesitation. "Pack whatever belongs to you and leave my house before lunch." No one breathed. Maya slowly lifted her eyes to meet his. They were steady, neither fearful nor defiant, simply patient, as though she had learned long ago that the loudest storms often exhausted themselves without help. "Is that your final decision, Mr. Caldwell?" she asked softly. Ethan gave a humorless laugh that bounced off the high ceilings. "You don't ask the questions here." He reached toward her open palm, took the heavy ring of keys, then tossed them onto the marble floor where they landed with a metallic clatter that echoed through the foyer like a judge's gavel. "Those keys never belonged in your hands anyway." Several staff members looked away, embarrassed by what they had just witnessed. Others stared silently at Maya, waiting for tears, an argument, or at least a desperate plea to keep her job. None came. She simply bent down, picked up the scattered keys one by one with careful hands, brushed away the dust that wasn't really there, and placed them neatly on the small walnut table beside the entrance. Her movements were unhurried, almost gentle, as if she were protecting something far more valuable than polished brass. Ethan folded his arms, convinced her silence was surrender. "Security will escort you out if necessary," he added. Maya nodded once. "That won't be necessary." Her voice carried no anger, only quiet certainty. She reached into the pocket of her apron and removed her cell phone. The screen illuminated her face for only a second before she selected a single contact already waiting at the top of her list. She listened for less than 3 seconds before speaking. "Good morning, Daniel." "Yes, it's time. Could you please come to the house now?" She ended the call, slipped the phone back into her pocket, and looked toward the tall windows overlooking the circular driveway where soft snowflakes drifted across the dormant oak trees. Ethan smirked. "Calling for another housekeeping job already?" Maya offered the smallest smile, one so calm it almost disappeared before anyone noticed. "No, sir," she replied. "I'm calling the people who need to be here before anyone else leaves this house." Maya Brooks had learned years ago that the quietest people often carried the heaviest stories. While the others in the mansion rushed to whisper behind closed pantry doors, she remained exactly where she was, standing beside the tall windows as gentle snow settled across the sprawling estate. The ancient oak tree in the front yard stretched its bare branches toward the gray January sky, just as it had every winter she could remember. Most people believed she had arrived 4 years earlier after answering a housekeeping advertisement. That was the version everyone accepted because it was simple. A woman in a uniform belonged in the background. Few people ever wondered where she had lived before, what she had studied, or why someone with such calm confidence never complained, never gossiped, and never hurried through even the smallest task. Every Monday morning she polished the library shelves herself, refusing to let anyone else dust the faded family photographs displayed along the walnut cabinets. Every Friday afternoon she walked through the garden before leaving, checking each flower bed, trimming broken branches, and making certain the old oak remained healthy after every storm. The gardeners often smiled at her dedication, assuming she simply took pride in her work. They never realized she knew the exact year every tree had been planted or why the fountain in the courtyard had been restored instead of replaced. To them, she was simply Miss Brooks, the dependable housekeeper who greeted everyone by name and remembered birthdays without writing them down. She always arrived before sunrise carrying a plain canvas tote instead of an expensive handbag. Inside were homemade sandwiches, a weathered notebook, and a small leather photo album that never left her side. During lunch, she sometimes opened it beneath the shade of the greenhouse, smiling quietly at photographs nobody else had ever seen. There was one picture she always paused on. A little girl wearing bright yellow rain boots stood beside the very same oak tree now visible through the front window. The child held the hand of a smiling couple whose faces carried the relaxed confidence of people who believed home was something that could last forever. Maya never showed that photograph to anyone. When the lunch break ended, the album returned to her bag, and she became nearly invisible once again. The staff respected her because she treated every person with the same kindness, whether they managed the estate or mowed the lawn. She listened more than she spoke. When someone struggled, she quietly helped without expecting gratitude. When new employees felt overwhelmed by the enormous property, she patiently showed them where extra supplies were stored or how the old heating system sometimes rattled before snowstorms. No one questioned how she knew every hidden hallway, every storage room, every loose floorboard beneath the east staircase, or every stubborn lock that needed an extra turn before opening. They assumed experience had taught her those details. The truth was much older than experience. Even after Ethan Caldwell signed the lease that brought him into the mansion nearly 3 years earlier, Maya continued treating every room with the same quiet devotion. She straightened paintings by instinct before anyone noticed they had shifted. She repaired tiny scratches in antique wood before they spread. She even reminded contractors never to drill into the original stone fireplace because the foundation beneath it was older than the Civil War. They often laughed and followed her advice anyway, because somehow she was always right. Standing beside the window now, watching snow gather across the winding driveway, Maya drew one slow breath and gently rested her fingertips against the cool glass. Her reflection looked peaceful, but deep inside she knew something had finally reached its inevitable ending. Some people believed a house belonged to whoever had the most money. Maya had always known a home remembered the people who loved it first. Ethan Caldwell had spent so many years winning that he no longer recognized the sound of disagreement. From the 32nd floor of his downtown headquarters to the sprawling estate where he now lived, every room seemed to bend around his decisions. Newspapers called him a visionary. Financial magazines praised his instinct for buying overlooked properties and transforming them into fortunes worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Television hosts admired his discipline, his confidence, and the relentless ambition that had carried him from a modest apartment in Chicago to private jets and boardrooms overlooking Manhattan. People applauded his success so often that eventually he began believing success alone proved he was right. Every morning followed the same precise routine. Fresh coffee waited exactly at 7 o'clock. His assistant reviewed the day's meetings before breakfast. Market reports arrived on a silver tray beside handwritten notes prepared by analysts who competed for his approval. If a presentation failed to impress him, it disappeared before lunch. If an employee hesitated while answering a question, someone more confident soon replaced them. Ethan called it maintaining excellence. His executives privately called it surviving another day. The mansion itself had become another acquisition in his growing portfolio, another symbol that reflected the life he believed he had earned. He admired its soaring columns, handcrafted woodwork, and sweeping staircase because they impressed investors during private dinners. He enjoyed watching guests pause beneath the massive chandelier, their expressions revealing the same admiration he expected from nearly everyone he met. Yet despite living there for almost 3 years, he had never bothered asking who had designed the stained glass windows or why the old oak tree remained untouched while every other corner of the property had been carefully modernized. Those details belonged to the staff, not to him. In his mind, ownership meant authority, and authority meant the freedom to change whatever he pleased. Earlier that same week, he had instructed a landscape architect to remove the aging oak and replace it with a circular fountain that would look better in aerial photographs. Maya had quietly suggested preserving the tree because its roots protected the original foundation beneath the east lawn. Ethan dismissed the comment without looking up from his tablet. He assumed she was simply sentimental. He never imagined she possessed knowledge no consultant could purchase. To him, she remained the housekeeper, a capable employee who knew where everything belonged but ultimately answered to him. He rarely remembered her full name. When speaking about her, he usually said, "The maid will handle it," or "Tell housekeeping to take care of it." The words came so naturally that he never considered how easily a person could disappear when reduced to a job title. Standing near the entrance now, Ethan adjusted the cuff of his tailored jacket and glanced impatiently toward the front gate. Snow continued drifting across the circular driveway, while several employees quietly gathered near the windows, pretending to organize flower arrangements as curiosity spread through the mansion. He assumed Maya had called a relative to help collect her belongings, or perhaps an attorney hoping to negotiate severance pay. Neither possibility concerned him. He had signed contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars. He employed teams of corporate lawyers whose names appeared in national legal rankings every year. Whatever conversation she believed was about to happen, he expected it to end exactly as every other disagreement in his business career had ended, with his signature, his confidence, and another reminder that money almost always had the final word. Outside, beyond the iron gates, the distant sound of approaching engines slowly interrupted the morning silence. The low hum of approaching engines grew louder until it rolled through the iron gates like distant thunder. Every face in the foyer turned toward the long circular driveway. Instead of one vehicle, 4 black luxury sedans entered the property in perfect formation, their headlights reflecting across the thin layer of melting snow. Ethan frowned. He had not scheduled any meetings that morning, and no investor visited without clearing security first. The lead vehicle stopped precisely at the base of the front steps. A second followed, then a third. Finally, the fourth came to rest beside the fountain. The doors opened almost in unison. 3 men and 2 women stepped out wearing dark overcoats despite the cold, each carrying slim leather briefcases instead of luggage. Their movements were calm, deliberate, and practiced. They did not look around in admiration of the mansion. They walked toward it as though they had every reason to be there. The front door opened before anyone knocked. Harold, the estate manager, hesitated. "Good morning. May I help you?" The oldest gentleman offered a courteous smile and presented a polished silver business card. "Daniel Whitmore. Whitmore, Ellis, and Grant Legal Trust Services. We have an appointment with Miss Maya Brooks." Harold blinked. "Miss Brooks," Daniel nodded politely. "She requested our presence approximately 20 minutes ago." The words settled over the foyer with surprising weight. Ethan stepped forward before Harold could respond. "I believe there is some confusion. The employee you are asking for has just been dismissed." Daniel's expression did not change. "Thank you for letting us know, Mr. Caldwell. Fortunately, our appointment was never related to her employment." Ethan folded his arms. "Then what exactly is this about?" Daniel glanced briefly toward Maya, who remained standing beside the window exactly where she had been all morning. She offered him a quiet nod. "Good morning, Mr. Whitmore." "Good morning, Miss Brooks," Daniel replied warmly. "I apologize for the delay. Traffic leaving downtown was slower than expected." Ethan watched the exchange with growing irritation. They spoke to one another with the familiarity of longtime colleagues rather than strangers. Daniel walked directly to Maya and handed her a thick cream-colored folder embossed with a gold seal. She accepted it carefully without opening it. One of the women beside him removed a tablet from her briefcase, while another produced several organized binders labeled with color-coded tabs. Nothing about the meeting appeared rushed. Nothing suggested panic or negotiation. It resembled the beginning of a carefully scheduled business review. Ethan let out a short laugh. "If this is about severance, you are wasting everyone's time. My legal department will handle any paperwork." Daniel turned toward him with the same calm professionalism. "We are not here to discuss severance, sir." "Then what are you here for?" Ethan asked. Daniel paused just long enough for the silence to fill the enormous foyer. Outside, snowflakes drifted slowly past the towering windows while the old oak stood motionless against the gray sky. Inside, even the fireplace seemed quieter. Daniel finally spoke. We are here because Miss Brooks instructed our firm to begin the ownership verification process immediately after a significant change in occupancy status occurred within this residence. Several employees exchanged confused glances. Ethan's confident smile faded only slightly. Ownership verification? Daniel inclined his head. Yes, sir. He gently placed one leather binder onto the polished entry table before opening it with deliberate care. And according to the trust agreement, that process cannot begin until every principal party is present inside the house. As of this moment, everyone we require is finally here. No one moved as Daniel Whitmore opened the binder. The crisp sound of each page turning echoed through the enormous foyer with surprising clarity, replacing the confidence that had filled the room only moments earlier. Ethan Caldwell remained standing with his arms folded, determined to project control, but his eyes followed every movement across the polished walnut table. Daniel carefully removed a sealed document, followed by a second folder marked with the embossed insignia of a nationally recognized trust administration firm. Beside him, the woman carrying the tablet quietly activated the screen and displayed a digital record while another member of the legal team arranged several notarized files in perfect order. Nothing about the presentation felt dramatic. It felt precise, prepared, and impossible to interrupt. Mr. Caldwell, Daniel began in the same measured voice. Before we continue, I need to confirm that you currently occupy this residence under Residential Executive Lease Agreement number 7831, effective 33 months ago. Ethan answered without hesitation. Correct. And your lease payments have been submitted to Brooks Heritage Residential Trust through its asset management division. Ethan frowned slightly. Payments have always been processed by my accounting office. I do not concern myself with the administrative details. Daniel nodded politely. That is consistent with our records. He slid a document across the table. Would you kindly verify the signature at the bottom of page 4? Ethan stepped closer, glanced at the page, and immediately recognized his own signature. It appeared beneath the words Executive Residential Lease Agreement. His expression tightened almost imperceptibly. Yes, that is mine. Daniel turned another page. Thank you. He then looked toward Maya with quiet respect. Miss Brooks, would you please confirm the succession certificate? Maya accepted the document without ceremony. She examined the final page, signed her name with a steady hand, and returned the pen. Daniel smiled. Thank you. The transfer acknowledgement is now complete. A murmur spread among the staff gathered near the staircase. Harold removed his glasses and stared at the paperwork as though hoping he had misunderstood everything. Ethan's patience finally began to crack. Enough with the formalities, he said sharply. Explain exactly what this is supposed to mean. Daniel met his gaze without raising his voice. Certainly, sir. Brooks Heritage Residential Trust has existed for more than 60 years. The estate in which we are currently standing has remained under that trust for 3 generations. Ethan laughed once, but there was little confidence left in the sound. Interesting history lesson. What does that have to do with today? Daniel gently closed one folder before opening another. Inside rested several aging photographs, property surveys, and original ownership records bearing county seals that had faded with time. One photograph showed the mansion decades earlier. Another showed the enormous oak tree when it was barely taller than a child. Daniel placed the final document at the center of the table. Everything. He allowed several seconds of silence before continuing. Following the passing of Richard and Eleanor Brooks, the trust named a single surviving beneficiary. Upon reaching the required age and satisfying all conditions established by the family charter, that beneficiary received full legal authority over every asset held within the trust, including this residence and the surrounding property. Ethan looked from the documents to Maya, then back again. His confident posture began to soften as unfamiliar uncertainty entered his eyes for the first time that morning. Daniel spoke one final sentence with calm clarity. Mr. Caldwell, the legal owner of this house has been standing in front of you since the moment you asked her to leave. Her name is Maya Brooks. The words settled over the mansion more heavily than the falling snow outside. No one rushed to speak. No one reached for another document. The silence itself seemed to become part of the room, drifting through the towering ceilings and resting gently against every polished surface. Ethan Caldwell remained motionless beside the walnut table, his gaze fixed on Maya Brooks as though he were seeing her for the very first time. The confident executive who had entered the foyer that morning believing every answer belonged to him suddenly found himself surrounded by questions he had never thought to ask. Maya did not celebrate. She did not smile with satisfaction or search the faces around her for approval. Instead, she quietly walked away from the legal documents and crossed the foyer toward the tall windows overlooking the front lawn. Beyond the glass, the old oak tree stood peacefully beneath its blanket of snow, its broad branches reaching across the winter sky exactly as they had decades earlier. She rested one hand lightly against the cool window pane. Her reflection blended with the familiar landscape outside until it almost appeared that she was standing beneath the tree instead of inside the house. Daniel and the members of his legal team respectfully stepped back without another word, understanding that some moments belonged not to paperwork, but to memory. The housekeepers lowered their eyes. Harold slowly removed his glasses again, gently polishing the lenses with a folded handkerchief although they were already perfectly clean. Even the fire burning inside the massive stone fireplace crackled more softly, filling the silence instead of interrupting it. Ethan's attention drifted toward the oak. For nearly 3 years he had viewed it as an obstacle to landscaping plans, another aging feature that could eventually be replaced with something more impressive. Only now did he notice how perfectly its roots framed the front lawn, how its branches protected the eastern side of the mansion from harsh winter winds, and how every window along the front hall seemed designed to capture its quiet beauty. It had never been an accident. Neither had Maya's devotion to preserving it. Slowly, she reached into the canvas tote resting beside her feet and removed the small leather photo album she carried every day. She opened it, carefully, turning several pages before stopping at the photograph of the smiling couple and the little girl wearing bright yellow rain boots beneath the same oak tree. She studied the picture for a long moment before gently placing her fingertips across the faded image of her parents. There were no tears, only gratitude that the place they had loved still stood. The soft ticking of the grandfather clock measured another quiet minute. Snowflakes continued drifting across the estate, covering the winding driveway where the black sedans waited patiently, without a single engine running. Inside the mansion, the expensive furniture, sparkling chandeliers, and polished marble suddenly seemed less important than the worn photograph resting in Maya's hands. Ethan watched her in silence, remembering every conversation he had dismissed, every suggestion he had ignored, every moment he had mistaken quiet dignity for ordinary obedience. He realized she had never cared about impressing anyone because her connection to the house had never depended on permission. She had not protected the property because someone paid her to do it. She had protected it because it carried the voices of the people she loved most. For the first time in years, Ethan lowered his eyes, not because anyone demanded it, but because the truth standing only a few steps away felt larger than wealth, titles, or pride. Daniel Whitmore quietly closed the final binder, but before anyone could speak, the woman standing beside him touched the screen of her tablet and projected a certified property record onto the large television mounted above the fireplace. The official county seal appeared first, followed by decades of ownership records stretching back more than half a century. Every transfer had been documented. Every signature had been preserved. Every amendment had been notarized. There was no missing page, no hidden condition, no overlooked technicality waiting to rescue Ethan Caldwell from the reality unfolding before him. Daniel spoke with the calm precision of someone presenting facts rather than opinions. The Brooks Heritage Residential Trust was intentionally structured to protect this estate from speculative sale. Miss Brooks was instructed by her late parents to experience the home as its caretaker before assuming public ownership. They believed stewardship should come before authority. Ethan stared at the screen, unable to look away. She chose to work here? Daniel nodded once. Yes, sir. For 4 years. Another document appeared. It contained maintenance approvals, restoration invoices, and preservation requests, each personally authorized by Maya under a confidential trustee designation that never revealed her identity to tenants. Ethan suddenly remembered dozens of moments that had once seemed insignificant. Every time she insisted a cracked stone be repaired instead of replaced. Every recommendation to preserve original wood instead of installing imported materials. Every quiet objection when he suggested removing historical features that no longer matched modern design trends. She had never argued to protect her job. She had been protecting her family's legacy. Harold slowly covered his mouth with trembling fingers as realization spread across his face. "That is why you always knew," he whispered. Maya turned toward him with a gentle smile. "My father used to walk me through every room after school. He told me every house remembers the people who care for it." Harold lowered his head, remembering how often he had admired her knowledge without ever asking where it came from. Ethan's thoughts raced backward through nearly 3 years of conversations he had barely listened to. He remembered dismissing her suggestions before she finished speaking. He remembered introducing wealthy guests to the mansion while Maya quietly adjusted paintings behind them, making certain nothing was out of place. He remembered calling her dependable without ever wondering why her devotion exceeded everyone else's. He had mistaken quiet humility for ordinary service because he had never imagined that true ownership could dress in a housekeeping uniform. Daniel reached into the binder one final time and removed a faded envelope sealed with dark blue wax. "There is one additional item," he said. "Your parents instructed our firm to deliver this only after your identity as owner became publicly acknowledged inside this residence." Maya accepted the envelope with careful hands. The handwriting across the front simply read, "For our daughter, when the house finally knows your name again." She slowly unfolded the letter and silently read the opening lines. A warm smile touched her face, not because of victory, but because the familiar handwriting instantly carried her back to childhood afternoons beneath the old oak tree. She gently folded the letter again and held it close against her heart. Ethan watched quietly as an unexpected truth settled inside him. He had spent his entire career believing the strongest person in every room was the one giving orders. Yet the woman standing only a few feet away had carried a family legacy, protected an historic home, accepted countless misunderstandings, and endured public humiliation without raising her voice once. For the first time in his professional life, Ethan understood that genuine strength did not announce itself. Sometimes it simply continued doing the right thing until the truth no longer needed anyone's permission to be seen. The silence finally broke when Ethan Caldwell took one slow step forward. The confidence that had once filled every movement was gone, replaced by the unmistakable hesitation of a man confronting a truth he could no longer outrun. He looked around the foyer at the employees who had witnessed everything from beginning to end, then lowered his eyes before speaking. "Miss Brooks," he said quietly, "I owe you more than an apology." His voice was steady, but no longer commanding. It carried the weight of regret instead of authority. Maya turned toward him, the folded letter from her parents still resting gently in her hands. She waited patiently without interrupting. Ethan drew a slow breath. "When I first moved into this house, I believed I had earned everything inside these walls. I measured people by titles, salaries, and the positions they held. I looked at you and saw only a uniform." He paused, struggling to continue. "I never stopped long enough to see the person wearing it." No one in the room spoke. The legal team remained respectfully silent, while the staff listened with quiet attention. Ethan continued, his words becoming more honest with every sentence. "You warned me about repairs I ignored. You protected this home in ways I never noticed. You cared for every room with more respect than I ever showed the people inside it. This morning I dismissed you without asking a single question because I assumed I already knew your worth." He looked directly at Maya. "I was wrong." The admission lingered in the air like the final note of a song. Maya studied him for several seconds before answering. "Mr. Caldwell, every person makes decisions they wish they could change." Her voice remained calm and warm, exactly as it had been throughout the morning. "The important question is what they choose after they learn the truth." Ethan nodded slowly. "If you ask me to leave today, I will understand completely." Maya glanced toward the tall windows where soft snow continued covering the estate in quiet white. She looked at the old oak tree standing peacefully beyond the glass and smiled almost to herself before returning her attention to Ethan. "My parents believe this house should always be a place where people could become better than they were yesterday." She gently placed the letter back inside its envelope. "If I answered humiliation with humiliation, I would betray everything they taught me." Harold quietly wiped moisture from the corner of his eye. Several members of the housekeeping staff exchanged small smiles of admiration. Daniel Whitmore folded his hands together, watching without speaking. Maya walked toward the walnut table where the ring of brass keys still rested exactly where she had placed them hours earlier. She picked them up carefully, held them for a moment, then extended them toward Ethan. His eyes widened in surprise. "These are not a reward," she said softly. "They are a responsibility. As long as you continue living here, I hope you will see this place differently." Ethan accepted the keys with both hands instead of one. The simple gesture revealed more humility than any speech could have expressed. "I promise you," he said quietly, "I will never again judge someone's value by the work they do or the clothes they wear." Maya smiled, not because she had won, but because someone had finally understood the lesson her parents had hoped this home would continue teaching long after they were gone. Outside, the snow kept falling over the old oak tree, covering every branch with the same quiet grace, never choosing one over another, reminding everyone inside the mansion that dignity, like winter light, belongs equally to all who stand beneath it. The following morning, the mansion welcomed the sunrise with a quietness that felt different from every day before it. Golden light slipped through the stained glass windows, scattering soft colors across the polished marble floor as though the house itself had taken a slow, peaceful breath. The old grandfather clock continued its steady rhythm. The fireplace carried the gentle warmth of glowing embers, and outside, fresh snow sparkled beneath the early morning sun. The estate looked exactly as it had the day before, yet somehow everything had changed. Maya Brooks walked through the front hallway carrying her familiar canvas tote. For the first time in years, she was not wearing her housekeeping uniform. Instead, she wore a simple navy sweater, dark slacks, and the same quiet smile that had never depended on anyone's approval. Several employees greeted her as she entered. They did not speak with nervousness or obligation. They greeted her with genuine respect. Maya answered each person by name, just as she always had. Nothing about her kindness had changed because of what everyone now knew. Harold approached with a fresh cup of coffee. "Good morning, Miss Brooks." She accepted it with gratitude. "Thank you, Harold. It smells wonderful." Across the foyer, Ethan Caldwell stood beside the tall windows overlooking the old oak tree. He had been there for several minutes before anyone arrived, watching sunlight settle across the broad branches that had witnessed generations come and go. In his hands rested the same ring of brass keys Maya had entrusted to him the previous afternoon. He turned as she approached. "Good morning," he said warmly. Maya smiled. "Good morning." Ethan carefully placed the keys onto the walnut table between them. "I finally understand why you always protected this place," he admitted. "It was never just a house." Maya looked toward the oak tree glowing beneath the morning light. "No," she answered softly. "It has always been a home." Ethan nodded. "I have already canceled the renovation plans. The tree stays exactly where it is." Maya looked outside once more, her expression filled with quiet appreciation. My father would have liked hearing that. For several peaceful moments, neither of them spoke. There was no awkwardness left between them, only the calm understanding that sometimes the greatest changes happened without applause. The legal team had completed every document before sunrise. The staff had returned to their routines. The mansion had resumed its ordinary rhythm. Yet every ordinary moment now carried a different meaning. Later that afternoon, Ethan gathered every employee in the foyer where the previous day's painful misunderstanding had begun. Standing beneath the crystal chandelier, he thanked each member of the staff individually for the work they performed every day. He listened instead of interrupting. He asked questions instead of making assumptions. When he reached Maya, he simply smiled with quiet respect. She answered with the same kindness she had shown from the very beginning. Outside, a gentle breeze moved through the branches of the old oak tree, sending tiny crystals of melting snow drifting softly across the front lawn like scattered diamonds. The house remained silent, but it no longer felt heavy. It felt alive. The walls still held memories of the past, yet they also welcomed the promise of something better. As evening settled across the estate and warm lights glowed behind every window, Maya paused at the front entrance and looked back one last time before stepping outside. She did not see a mansion defined by wealth or status. She saw the laughter of her parents echoing through old hallways, the quiet strength of forgiveness, and the simple truth they had spent a lifetime teaching her. Real ownership had never come from having the keys. It came from having the heart to leave every person and every place better than you found it.